Hi, my name is Kim, and I'm taking the part about overview of Deleuze and his work, as well as contextualize into early childhood education to support children behavior. So Deleuze is a French philosopher, and his philosophy mentioned about the concept of differences becoming virtuality and rhizomatic thinking. The first idea is the concept of difference, which suggests that reality is not composed of fixed identities but of dynamic variation and ongoing processes of change. Instead of seeing the world as made of fixed identities such as child, adult, good, bad, normal, abnormal, Deleuze suggests that reality is constantly changing and composed of differences and variations. For example, the traditional view often compares children to a standardized expectation of typical development, and for that is position neurodivergent children as lacking delay, deficits, or abnormal. But Deleuze see the world in different way. That difference should not be understood as deviation from a norm, but this is a fundamental aspect of reality. So from that perspective, differences in thinking, learning, or behavior just a represents a diverse way of engaging in our world. For example, a child who refer repetitively or intense focus on particular interests, maybe just on expressing alternative ways of the way he understanding or exploring their world. So neurodivergent children is just a natural variation in human development. And instead of trying to normalize a child behavior, educator can value different way of a child perceive, process, and interact in their own words. The second idea is becoming, which see development as ongoing changes. He argued that people are always in the process of becoming rather than moving toward a fixed identity or a final state. He sees children are not incomplete adults moving toward a final state, but children as a learner who constantly developing through interaction with their environment. So rather than seeing development as a linear progression toward a final state, children are understood as constantly developing through experiences with people, material, and environment. The third idea is the concept of virtual and actual, which can be explained simply like this. So, difference mean reality is made from variations and differences. And the virtual is where the variation and possibility exist before they become name or label. So when something become actual, it often get names and classified. For example, in the context when a child who refused to join a group activity might be labeled as withdrawn or non-participating. But that is the actual view when we use language to name them into an actual identity. But also, the same child might contain many virtual possibilities, such as maybe engaging differently, feeling unsure, referring one-to-one interaction, observing quietly, or something like that. So, to support children behavior, we might reflect on our approach. For example, the way we label a child might put them into an actualized identity or a fixed identity and biasly overlook many virtual possibilities that not visible there. Also, because there are many virtual differences, a child should be seen as full of potential and possibility. The final concept is the idea of apportionment structure and rhizomatic structure, where he explained this as a tree that has clear strong and branches, which is linear, organized, and hierarchical. Now he opposed this idea to the a rhizome, which is a root system that doesn't follow any set plan. It draw and connect unpredictable and decentralized way. And by this view, human knowledge, identity, and development is like a rhizome that's not linear, not organized, and not traceable. However, in early childhood context, we all know about developmental milestone, learning outcome, assessment, tracking progress, or something like that. And his idea become a bit hard to turn into daily practice if we completely cut off the support from this measurable tool. So the question is, if development is completely non-linear, how do educators access tracking developments? Our group come to a final agree that his perspective should be used as a scope to rethink our practice rather than replacement of all measurable tool that we are using right now. His philosophy can help educators to openly be flexible and view diversity and multiple possibility, but still using assessment framework critically.
Hi, I'm Tao. Today I'll talk about the relationships between Deleuze theory and relational pedagogy and his perspective on power in supporting children's behavior. From Deleuze's perspective, children's behavior is not something fixed inside the child. Instead, behavior is shaped through relationships and interactions with other people, as well as the environment around them. This idea is also supported by Asikwa, which explains that relational pedagogy is about building responsive and supportive relationships with children. Children are more likely to feel confident and be able to control their behavior when they feel safe, secure, and supported. For example, a child may refuse to pack away toys and says no to educator. Instead of giving a strict instruction, the educator may respond calmly and say, I can see you still enjoy your play. Let's pack away together and we can come back later. The educator stays with the child and supports them through the transition. The child feels the child can feel understood and is more cooperative. Therefore, in this case, the child's behavior changed because the relationship supported them, not because they were forced to comply. Um, it is supported by M- Marina Fleer Research 2015. She also explains that children's behavior is influenced by their social and the cultural environment, including interpersonal interactions. It's also emphasized that the environment and interactions act as active participants in shaping behavior, not just the child. Therefore, rather than emphas- emphasizing control, educators should concentrate to developing trust, listening to children, and reacting with empathy. So behavior is not something we just control, but rather something is co-constructed through relationships. Um, Deleuze also discussed about power, which is important when considering behavior in early childhood environment. He contends that power is present in all aspects of daily life, including norms, rules, and expectations, rather than being limited to the educator. These factors influence our understanding of appropriate behavior. For example, in group time, children are expected to sit still, listen quietly, and follow instructions. A child may be considered misbehaving if they talk or move around a lot. From uh, Deleuze's perspective, this behavior may actually represent the child's need for movement, interaction, or a different way of participation. This research also supported that children may be positioned as well behaved or challenging as a result of these expectations. This means behavior is not just about the child, but also about how the system defines and interprets that behavior. It emphasizes how norms concerning acceptable behavior can be reinforced by behavior guidance. In fact, educators should consider how their policies and procedure might affect children's behavior. By giving children choice and listening to their opinions, educators can share power rather than just controlling behavior. Giving children the freedom to decide how they sit or engage in group activities is one example. This fosters children's agency and makes the classroom more welcoming and adaptable. Overall, Deleuze clarified that relationship, context, and power is the environment all influence a child's behavior.
Right. And hi, I'm Alex, and I'll be focusing on Deleuze's perspective on language and subjectivity in relation to supporting their behavior. And I want to begin by linking back to Kim's part, where she introduced Deleuze's theory, visualized by horizon, and how it challenges fixed identity in linear development theories. That is a really important detail that fueled the rest of our presentation, because rejecting those linear ideologies mean that we need to question the language we use to describe the children's behavior and what that language could do, like the power it can produce. And we all know that the power of words and how they could potentially influence decisions and shape behaviors. Research shows that language can influence how individuals, in this case children, perceive themselves and others, and in turn affect their confidence, relationship, and behavior. So in early childhood, when teachers overuse phrases like good job sitting down or challenging behavior, it may sound supportive, but it actually creates norms that counts as what is acceptable behavior and pushing what we expect children to do. So when we describe children as challenging, we're essentially labeling their behavior, comparing it to our own expectation of what is correct, and placing responsibility onto the child. And this connects directly to Tao's discussion on power, because these developmental-based language are shaped by the rules and system and dominant ideas about what children should be like. So when we use labels like good, difficult, or non-compliant, we reduce something very fluid and relational into something fixed, which is language. This means that language can really limit how children are seen and how they're expected to act. So instead of asking, how do we correct this behavior? In a Deleuzian approach, we can ask, what is this behavior doing in this context? And it shifts our language regarding behavior away from control and the norm and connecting to relational pedagogy, where behavior is understood for relationships, which is proven above, matches Deleuze theory. Moving on to subjectivity. And research shows that if language shapes how behavior is understood, then over time it also shapes who the children becomes. Subjectivity is about how children come to see themselves, their identity, and their sense of what they can do, their abilities. So from a critical perspective, these identities are not fixed or natural, but produced through everyday interaction, language, and power. In behavior guidance, children are often positioned into roles such as well-behaved, quiet, or challenging. These are not just description, but they shape how children are treated and how they begin to understand themselves. This links back to Kim's idea on becoming. While Deleuze sees identity as always shifting, behavior guidance practice can fix children into predictable categories. And research shows that children can begin to internalize these positions. A child who often seen as challenging may start to act within that role, not because it defines them, but because it shapes how others respond to them. And which brings it back to relational pedagogy and how relationships are where these identities are reinforced or changed. Educators are not only responding to behavior, they're shaping children's sense of self. And power is also present there, because the way we define our behavior determines which identities are valued and which are seen as problems. Research suggests that what we consider normal behavior is shaped by cultural and social expectations rather than something universal. So when children who do not fit this expectation are positioned as lacking or needing correction, yeah. So from Deleuzian perspective, this limits their possibility for becoming. Instead of seeing them as fixed type, Deleuze encourages us to see them as multiple, changing, and always in formation. So to bring this together, I would like to put language, relationship, the power are all interconnected,
similar to the idea of the rhizome. And behavior is not located within the child, but is produced all across these connections. And the way we speak, interpret, and respond to behavior shapes not only what behavior means, but also who the children are allowed to become. So instead of guiding children towards one correct way of behaving, Deleuzean approach invites us to keep possibilities open and value the difference, and to support children in their ongoing process of becoming. Thank you so much.
Thank you.